Welcome to Exception Seekers, the show where we challenge conventional views on youth mental health and explore stories and experiences that offer alternative perspectives. I'm very excited today to have a new perspective on mental health and what that looks like from an athletic viewpoint. And so I'm joined today by Alena Luciani, strength and conditioning coach, entrepreneur, owner and founder, Training to Excel. So coming to us from Toronto. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here because I think this is a very important conversation. And I think a lot of the things we probably talk about today might stem from my life as an athlete and a strength and conditioning coach, but can definitely overlap in like so many different areas of life.
Well, I'm excited. So let's start with you. Young athlete, varsity athlete, into strength and conditioning coach, into entrepreneurship. You've had quite a journey. So maybe just share for us a little bit about how you got to where you are, what led you to where you are today.
As you mentioned, I have pretty much grown up as an athlete all my life, and I'm so grateful for that because I think there are so many wonderful life lessons that sport taught me from a very young age that I don't think I recognized the importance of until I was an adult. So there's just so much, like, even as small children, I was like 5 playing on a soccer team and learning how to work together with others and having teammates and making new friends and building connections. Like, all of these things that we just kind of had to do being in that environment are actually really wonderful life skills. So I knew from a pretty young age that I wanted to stay involved in sport as long as I could. And once I found basketball that I kind of refer to as my first true love, and I apologize to my husband, but I think it's an accurate statement. And so I was fortunate enough to play basketball kind of all throughout elementary school and high school while also participating in other sports, which I always like to mention because I think that's actually a really important part of development from a physical, emotional, and mental standpoint for any athlete. And as I mentioned, there's so many different sports that teach you different things and different coaches. And I thought that was really cool to be able to experience so many different perspectives and coaching styles and leadership styles while playing kind of a multitude of sports. But ultimately, basketball is what allowed me to continue to excel in sport through university. So I was fortunate enough to play 4 years of basketball at Laurier and a year of lacrosse. So actually, in my fifth and final year, I switched and played lacrosse. And at that point, I was doing my kin degree, and I had an experience early on where I had the opportunity to work in a high performance training facility with hockey players. And I really went into it initially being like, oh, this will be great for my kin hours that I needed to get. And it's going to be great to be in a training facility when I need to train myself for my sport. And I had already become a personal trainer at the athletic complex at Laurier. So I was like, oh, this seems to be a really good fit. And little did I know that that was going to kind of open the door to strength and conditioning and kind of show me this world that has so many different opportunities. Because when I was going into kin at Laurier, it was very much like, are you going to be a phys ed teacher or are you going to be a physiotherapist? And both of those roles are wonderful, but I'm like, there has to be other opportunities, like there has to be other occupations. So strength and conditioning, I think at that point was still quite a young industry. I think it still is, but fortunate that I got into it as early as I did. And then I played my 4 years of basketball, my year of lacrosse. I graduated. I ended up working at Laurier as the head strength coach for 2 years. Then I went on to pursue my master's in sports science and recreation with a distinction in coaching from Ohio University and got the opportunity to work with the teams there, which was really, really cool to be able to get that kind of Division 1 perspective. Came home, got another job at another Canadian university as a full-time assistant, and it was after that year that I decided to pursue Training to Excel full-time. And I should mention that I started Training to Excel back in 2015 when I was working at Laurier, and I started it as essentially a passion project. I had graduating athletes saying, Elena, I don't know what to do in the gym. Can you write me a program? And so it was my mom, who is an entrepreneur herself, that was like, I think you should register yourself as a business to create some legitimacy and just see where it goes. And I thought, I could see myself in my 40s and my 50s, like running my own business, like for sure. I'll do the collegiate thing for a couple decades and then I'll run my own business. And so I registered myself as a business. I would do online programming, which I still do today. It's still one of my like core services, which is pretty fun. I was building ebooks, I was writing blog posts, like just as kind of like a creative outlet for myself while I was in this collegiate space. And then in the summer of 2017, I very suddenly lost my father to a really severe heart attack. And I mention that because I had just accepted the role at York University.
Mm.
And it happened like literally in the span of like a week of me accepting that role. And I started 3 days after his funeral. Obviously, and I feel like this is a safe space to share these sorts of things, but obviously you become very reflective when a big life event like that happens.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I went into that year being so grateful that I had an opportunity and something to, I don't want to say distract me, but I think like keep me moving forward is like,
Mhm.
you know, dealing with grief and starting a new job. It's was very challenging, but I think I'm
Sure.
very
Yep.
fortunate to have been in a space where I was like, okay, I have somewhere to like wake up and go to each day, and I have direction and I have guidance. But in being in that position, there were a lot of things that I started to learn about the collegiate space that there's just like a lot of red tape. A lot of people that know nothing about it, but they can say no. And I just started to realize that I'm such a multi-passionate individual that there were so many things within the realm of strength conditioning that I wanted to offer and provide for athletes I was working with that I just wasn't able to do working for someone else. So I decided to leave my cushy unionized full-time position at a
Yes.
university, and I decided to pursue training to excel full-time to just see what would happen. And I'm happy to say that that was April of 2018 and it
Yeah.
is 2025, so here we are.
That's a risk. It's a leap. And, kind of
Mhm.
that like I'm going to try and do that. And I mean, maybe seeing your mom, as you said, as an entrepreneur, perhaps interesting. She so many years before that was like, you should just register this just in case.
Always listen to your mother because she also is the one that came up with the name Training to Excel. And for
Oh,
anyone that
interesting.
sees it written, it's
Hmm.
training, the number two, and the letters XL. And I
Hmm.
had actually started a small group training program for athletes at Laurier when I was still a student. And I had to come up with a name, and my mom was the one that suggested Training to Excel. And then at the end, like when I was graduating, she said, you know what? I think you should hold on to that name. It might be something one day. And so,
And
shout out to my mom.
well, and okay, and so and then in you maybe, to run with this name, but one of the things, for people who aren't familiar with training to excel, there's this piece of it of supporting athletes in life, which is
Mhm.
interesting, I
Yeah.
think, because a lot of your background prior or during it was with like very high level performance athletes,
Yeah.
um, very competitive. But then there's this piece of athletes in life. And
Mm.
yeah, I'm just curious, like, what was it that made you say this piece too? Because you still do very
Yes.
competitive training for people,
Mhm.
but this other piece.
Yeah, so I like to refer to everyone as an athlete. We have athletes in sport and athletes in life. So my athletes in sport are my athletes that, yes, are training for a specific race or competition or season, and I still
Mhm.
service those athletes. But I think, even in going back 10 years ago to that initial like all of these athletes saying, "Oh, I'm graduating, I don't know what to do in the gym, when I leave school." Those are who I would think of as my athletes in life. All of a sudden they're transitioning from sport and this life that they're so used to being scheduled for them and everything was guided and coached and led for them, and then they're entering adulthood where all of a sudden, like, now everything rests on their shoulders. And so I wanted to create a team environment for everyone. I wanted to create a team environment for individuals that used to have it, that missed that piece of their life, or that
Mhm.
never got the opportunity to have that and seek that, or want that in their adult life. And I think the more I'm in it, like, connection and community has always been so important to me, but I just think after what we've been through in the last several years, I think
Mhm.
everyone now is really starting to understand the importance of community and being a part of a team.
Mhm.
And as much as, like, I feel like a lot of the athletes in life I work with, funny enough, are like retired athletes that, like I said, like, used to have all of that, structure and kind of seek that in their adult life. But then I also have a good portion of my community that are individuals that maybe never played a competitive sport, but want that team environment, want to feel like they're part of a collective, and they have people to lean on when they're working towards their goals.
As someone who follows your social media, in that weird way where I can be like, "Ooh, I saw you do this."
Yeah.
But one of the things that stands out to me so much is the team environment. It's like, yes, these seem to be individuals in many ways, right? Who just are like joining as something, but you go out for coffee, like you have coffee time with them and, very intentional social time for those who want that. And I think that's so unique to what I have always viewed as, just a gym space and training and coaching and what that is. It seems to be, yes, a very cool piece of what you're doing.
You know what? I have to shout out my community for that because I'm so fortunate to have aligned myself with such awesome people that are so
Mhm.
receptive and open to connecting with others.
Mhm.
And, I have people that have started into, like, my small group training program as an example. They have started because a friend of theirs is a part of it. So it's like, there are some common ties to begin with. But then the coolest thing is when I start to see people, like, spending time together outside of our training session, outside of our team socials, people connecting, people sharing in our group chat, like, funny jokes and things that they come across. Like, that is there's a moment I feel like I often have where I almost have to take a step back and just be like, this is so special. Like,
Mhm.
yes, I'm so proud of everyone for following a periodized strength training program and being committed to their physical well-being, but I
Mhm.
think it's that, like, mental emotional well-being that has absolutely been a huge driving force in my business, and I really do think that is what sets Training to Excel apart. Like, so many
Mhm.
people are going to be like, "Oh, what's different about?" I A lot of people that do what we're all doing similar things. Like, no one is really reinventing the wheel, but I think it's the people in my community that are really what kind of, like, set us
Mhm.
apart from maybe a different company or gym or facility. And yeah,
Mhm.
it's like the little things, like, on Saturdays, I coach a team session, a small team session from 10 to 11 a.m. And then 90% of the individuals that take class, we all go across the street and get coffee together and spend an hour just chatting and talking. And, like, it's moments like that that I'm like, this
Mhm.
this is special.
It
And
is.
it's almost hard to articulate,
Mhm.
though. So it's like it's
Mhm.
special that you see that even just from what I share.
I think it is so special. And I'm so glad to hear that you do sometimes step back to recognize that. Because, yes, maybe there are wonderful individuals in your community for sure. But I think, it also takes someone to develop that sense where people want to be a part of it. And so I think that's pretty neat and yeah, very special of what you've done. I was thinking as you were talking, you keep using the word coaching. You have like a team coaching session. But I know you went to school for strength and conditioning and did
Mhm.
coaching, so it's like a thing. But why coaching and not training?
What I will say is I like to say training versus working out. So instead of saying, like, "Oh, come for a workout," it's like, "Come to train," because I think training really signifies that it's part of your lifestyle and it's something that you're consistent with and it's something that's sustainable, as opposed
Mhm.
to, like, a one-off workout that you can do at a group fitness space. And there is nothing wrong with that. I will never knock any sort of movement, but that's just intentional wording that I use. I like to refer to people training versus working out. But when it comes to the my title, I refer to myself as a coach and not a personal trainer. And there is nothing wrong with being a personal trainer, but for me, the title, the coach part of my title is actually very important to me for a variety of different reasons. First and foremost, my education is in strength and conditioning, primarily with team sports. So in that realm, coach is a very important part of our title. That should be reflective of the certifications I have, the education I have. And it's not to say that personal trainers don't have the same thing, but I do think in strength and conditioning, there are certain requirements that need to be met in order to have access to certain opportunities. And that's something that I worked really hard for. And I think the other piece to it, which is the most important piece, is I come from a long line of coaches and individuals that I think held such impactful roles on their teams and in their communities. And I
Mhm.
don't think personal trainer does that role justice. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying, and I hope, like, just to clarify, like, there
Mhm.
is nothing wrong with with people referring to me as a personal trainer. It happens, but I am very mindful of referring to myself as a strength and conditioning coach because
Mhm.
it is multifaceted, but it's like a way I get to honor my dad and the coach that he was. It's a way I get to honor my athletic background and all the coaches that led me that I admire so much that are role models to me. And
Mhm.
I just think the term coach is like all encompassing. Like, I feel like in my mind, being a good coach isn't just about knowing the X's and O's of your sport. It's about being able to lead a group of individuals. It's the ability to lead by example. It's the ability to bring people together. And I think the term personal trainer doesn't do that role justice. Like, I actually think there may be, I don't know, a different kind of coach. Like, I don't know what we call it, but
Yes.
I think that's why the coach part of my title is
Mhm.
so important. And it's a title that I think, unfortunately, on social media, I think it's diluted a little bit because I feel like what happens is all of a sudden, like, everyone's a coach. Like, I'm a painting coach, I'm a water bottle coach. And I don't want to diminish anything that, those individuals are doing. But at the same time, like, being a
Mhm.
coach is a very, very important and powerful title. And that's
Mhm.
not something to take for granted. And that's not something to take lightly. I feel like when I call myself a coach, like, I'm taking on a big responsibility. And I know that. And I'm aware of that. And I'm just
Mhm.
not sure that everyone that calls themselves a coach
Mhm.
understands the responsibility that comes with the title.
Yeah, and I feel that sometimes too, similarly, in my field where yeah, it's sometimes hard to like differentiate yourself within a title that can mean a lot of different things and reflect a lot of different levels of experience and training. So, okay, so coach, I love how you kind of like hold it up there a little bit, right? Of like, this is like a really
Yeah.
important role. So, if we think of young athletes in sport. And,
Mhm.
I certainly live in a very sport dominated town of hockey. There's a lot of emphasis on parents, right? Like get your kids involved in sport, which I think is all well and good because there's like wonderful things that can come of that. And coaches hold a very influential role in the lives of like pretty vulnerable people. But for parents who are
Yeah.
wanting to get their kids involved, how do they know the person coaching them? Like, what do they look for? What should they look for in they're watching a practice. What should they see as either yay, that's going really well, or a
Yeah.
red flag of like, oh, I don't like how this is going.
That is such a good question because I feel like I am fortunate to have had some really awesome coaches, and I would say I'm also fortunate to have had some not great coaches because it taught me how I don't want to operate. And I do think
Right.
that I think, unfortunately, at some point we're going to come across a teacher, a mentor, a leader, a coach, an employer that you don't love. And I
Hmm.
do think that's an important learning experience, but I think
Hmm.
especially during those like really pivotal influential years for youth athletes, it's really important that the individuals leading these athletes not only understand the sport, like that should be one part of it, but I think
Sure.
the other aspect is like, are they a good listener? Are they attentive at practice? Do they make eye contact with the athletes when they're speaking? What does their body language say? Like, does it look like they want to be there, or are they off talking to their buddy on the side as the kids just run through these drills? I think there is
Hmm.
like a personality component to it. And I think it's important that parents trust their gut. Like, I
Hmm.
think my biggest thing is like actions and words should align. If the coach is saying one thing and doing another, that to me is a red flag. And I can only bring that up though because I've experienced playing for coaches that said one thing and did another. And so
Right.
if the kids are saying like if a kid comes home from practice and says the coach said if I make it to every single practice, I'm going to get at least 5 minutes of playing time. And the kid goes to every single practice and then come game time, they don't see the field, the court, the ice at all. That to me is a red
Hmm.
flag. It's not to say you pull your kid out right away, but it's having like open lines of communication. So maybe in that situation, that kid isn't leaving the team, but maybe it's conversations of like, I want you to continue to work hard and represent yourself and show up for your teammates, and if there is like misalignment on what the coach is saying and doing, like that's something
Hmm.
I want you to talk to me about. So then it's like almost like a
Right.
learning opportunity as opposed to just being like, well, this coach is bad, pull them out of it.
Right.
Because I do want to give some people like, everyone has a bad day, right? I can't say that I've been the 100% best coach every time I've
Yes.
showed up. So it's like I
Yes.
also want to recognize that people are humans, and I think in a lot of cases, the individuals coaching youth sport also have a lot of other things on their plate. So if it's
Hmm.
like a slip up here and there, a miscommunication here and there, that's human, it happens.
Hmm.
But if it's like something that's very like almost more like mental and psychological of like, I'm telling
Hmm.
you this one thing, but I'm going to do the exact opposite and see how you respond. Like that's the stuff that it's
Yes.
like, that to me is a red flag.
Yeah, there are pieces, it's individual relationships too. Like some coaches for some people will work differently than coaches for other people. And
For
I,
sure.
I feel sometimes I feel sometimes for coaches with some of those sports too, because a lot of the times I think it's, very well-meaning parents who there's
Yeah.
a need for coaches, right? It's like, come on, we need people to help. And so sometimes they're there because they want to give the opportunity to their child
Mhm.
or other kids, but they don't necessarily have a background doing it. And so, there's a lot of different like pieces in it, but I like the, walk the walk, talk the talk kind of.
I appreciate the coaches that I didn't love, and I appreciate
Right.
the coaches that I actually don't think were good coaches at all because they taught me almost more than what my good coaches taught me. And I mean, again, that was when I started to become a little bit more self-aware. I had been in sport a long time. That's different when we're talking about a youth athlete that's maybe like 8 to 13 years
Right.
old. Like I think there is a responsibility with that title. And, again, I can totally appreciate that some parents are like, I'm stepping up for my kid and no one else is stepping up, so I got to do it. But it's like there's also a piece of like, okay, if you're saying yes to this, then you do have to be cognizant of
Hmm.
your role and how you're
Hmm.
approaching it and how you want these athletes to leave this experience and how you want them to feel when they do.
And so for young people who are trying to navigate, whether it's team sport or individual sport, but more of a competitive sport, if you were to give advice to them or your younger self of just the like mental piece of how do you show up and physically compete, mentally compete, but also protect your mental and emotional well-being in that environment.
Two things come to mind for me. One is you are more than an athlete, and that just refers to the identity piece. Like I know I'm definitely someone that I pretty much put all my eggs in the athlete basket. Like if I was playing well in sport, whether it was basketball or a different sport I was playing, it was like I felt super confident and I felt like I could do anything. And then when I wasn't playing well or wasn't getting playing time, I was like, I'm a terrible basketball player, I'm a terrible daughter, I'm a terrible sister and friend and student. Like I can't do anything. And it's taken me a really, really, really long time to kind of like disassociate from the roles that I hold and being a
Mhm.
strength coach and being an entrepreneur and being an athlete. It's like these are things that are part of me. Absolutely. They are part of my identity, but they aren't the only part of my identity. So I mean, I loved growing up as the kid that was kind of the jock. Like I played all the sports, I did all the things, I followed my brothers, like I was always very invested in it and I loved that about myself. And I wish from an earlier age, I just gave myself permission to be a little bit more multifaceted. And I think that's what I've come to learn in my adult life is like I can I could be the strength coach. I could love going to the gym and strength training. And I could also enjoy going to Pilates and going on Pinterest and going shopping and picking out outfits and things that, like, I think society just puts these things in, particular buckets for everyone. But I think it was so important for me to learn that I'm so much more than just what I do
Mhm.
and it's okay to be a multitude of things. So there could be young athletes that also love to be in the school play or play an instrument and it's like those things can coexist. Like you can be all the things you want to be and I encourage young athletes to have hobbies and have things outside of sport because not only will honestly like even some of the athletes like I've worked with it's like the ones that knew how to play piano or guitar or like had different skills in different areas
Mhm.
they there were certain drills and things that they almost could execute a little bit more efficiently than someone who didn't have the skills of like reading music or just even just like I mean we don't have to go too deep in like how the brain works but like it is pretty cool to
Yeah.
see you know when athletes have more on their plate than just their sport, I think that's a really positive thing mentally,
Mhm.
physically, and emotionally.
Mhm.
And the second thing that came to mind, I'm blanking. Oh, yes, sorry. I was like, I knew there was a second one.
Yeah.
Reminding myself that it's a game and games are meant to be
Mm.
fun. And I think this got harder as I got older, but there is a reason why I played 4 years of basketball and then in my fifth and final year, I switched and played lacrosse. Unfortunately, I went through an experience where the love of my first true love, basketball, was essentially taken away from me for a variety of, with a variety of different actions. And it was making me hurt more than it was bringing me to life and making me have fun and love and joy around the sport. And so in switching to lacrosse, that experience was so different. And I think part of it is because I reminded myself like this is a game and games are meant to be fun. And that doesn't mean you don't take it seriously. I always took my sports very, very seriously. But at the
Mhm.
end of the day, we're supposed to be enjoying this game. And I also think from like when I think back to like my sports psych class, it's like that optimal level of arousal where you're kind of in that flow state of like, focusing just enough, but also not too much that you're just in this like, I'm having fun and things are working, but I can still
Yeah.
think about what the next play is and what my next action is, but I'm also not thinking like too far into the game and I'm just kind of taking it in stride. Like, there is research to support that
Yeah.
we need to remind ourselves like it is meant to be fun.
It's like it's funny because hearing you say that, right? It's like, yes, of course. And it's such a
Yeah.
simple idea, but then I also think, oh, how quickly that gets lost sometimes
Mhm.
with the need of competitiveness, or there's always like the next level to try out for, or not always, but
Yeah.
sometimes we can get caught up in that and forget.
Well, And that's why I almost recommend, like I've had some parents ask me, I've worked with a lot of hockey players at a lot of different ages, and I've had parents ask me about like, well, can they play another sport, or I don't want them to because I don't want them to be injured for hockey, or another specific sport that they played. And I would actually recommend, especially like up to a certain age, let them play all the sports. Not only will it benefit them in their desired sport, so let's say it's hockey or let's say it's
Mhm.
basketball, there's so many different qualities that they can learn from different sports. But I
Right.
also think it allows them the opportunity to be a part of a team and not be the go-to and not be the number one
Mm.
and not be the star player. And I think that takes a lot of pressure off young athletes and allows them to just play.
Mm.
So for me, my sport was basketball, but my like I would call it my like fun sport was volleyball. I had so much fun playing volleyball. And honestly, I was pretty decent because I didn't put so much pressure on myself. And I just
Mm.
went and I just played. And the
Right.
jumping and the change of
Right.
direction and the agility needed for volleyball had a great translation into basketball. But it
Yes.
just gave me an opportunity to be part of a team, to not be the one that everything was riding on, and just
Hmm.
allowed me to play. And I think that's a huge, huge benefit that unfortunately some young athletes miss out on, because whether they make the decision or someone else makes the decision for them, but they're almost thrust into their like prime sport too soon without having some like additional activities to like support their mental health, as well as their physical health.
Yeah, that's a cool perspective. I'd never thought of that of, I mean, I like I played sport here and there, but I was certainly never that person that held that responsibility for the team. But
Yeah.
as you say that, I could think, oh yeah, that actually would could be a lot to carry. And maybe, yes, then being a like average player on another team might be kind of fun and just, or even a like not so great player on another team might be really a nice break.
Yeah, and I think it also like there's also a lot of like life skills that teaches you, right?
Mm.
Like I was fortunate to from a very young age, probably because of my height and my stature, like I excelled in basketball pretty quickly. And, I'm fortunate that I was able to play as long as I did, but I think that was only possible because I continued to play other sports and learn different roles on different teams.
Mhm.
Because when you always expect to start and be the captain and be the leader and all of these things, you can be in for a rude awakening if you join a team and all of a sudden you're riding the bench and you don't
Mhm.
know how to operate in that role. And I think playing different sports, and again, ones you're not as good at, it's like you're trying something new, you're getting to play with different people, but you're also learning
Mhm.
how to navigate different roles within a team, which I think is a really important lesson that not enough
Mhm.
people talk about.
So, from your perspectives, then, of having played, having coached, now in your role with like athletes at various stages in their lives, if you were to be able to say, here's how we could change education or how we could train, I'm thinking of, as it relates to like new coaches coming in or mentoring young athletes, what is missing right now and what could there be to make that better?
I mean, I'm a big fan of the like connection and communication piece, and I
Yes.
really think those are foundational principles for all leaders. And I almost wish that there was more training specifically for sport coaches and for leaders in different spaces under the
Hmm.
realm of building rapport and learning how to develop relationships with individuals and connect with individuals, but also how to communicate in a multitude of ways to a variety of different people. Because I really believe that communication is more than just talking. And I think when people recognize the power of nonverbal communication, let's say, so your body language, you could have a
Hmm.
really awesome coach that's, maybe this is a parent watching their kids practice. The coach could know all the X's and O's. But if they sit on the bench with their arms crossed looking at their phone for the whole
Right.
practice, it doesn't matter how much they know about the sport.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of lessons that aren't taught that should
Right.
be. So I think, I believe that there should be education beyond the X's and O's of a particular sport or of a particular activity to
Hmm.
ensure that the coach or the leader recognizes the importance of the little things that happen within a practice, within a game, within a season.
Mhm.
And that's like the little things like, how do you speak to your team before and after a game? How do you approach parents when they have a question for you? Right? Like there are things that it's like those things for a lot of people
Mhm.
are innate, I think, like just based off of your own experience. But I think there are some people that have potential to be really, really great leaders and really, really great coaches, but they
Mhm.
kind of miss the mark on those really important foundational pieces. So I wish there was more formal education on that. That's honestly why I've ended up building my own courses because there
Yes.
wasn't formal education in my field on it. But I
Mhm.
also think it's just like understanding that you're working with humans. And
Yep.
again, you could write up the perfect play, but if one of your athletes is really sad because they're going through something and they're really struggling with it mentally, they might not be able to execute that play to the
Yep.
standard you think. But if you have open lines of communication, maybe that athlete will approach you and say, "Hey, I'm not at my best today. I'm going to try my best and I'm here. But
Yes.
the last play of the game, you might need to put in someone else in my
Yep.
place." Right? Those conversations could happen if there's a certain foundation and a certain environment and culture built.
Being a young person can be tough. Raising a young person can be tough. Whether it's school stress, family dynamics, or navigating challenging emotions, everyone needs the right support. That's where Sound Youth Counseling comes in. We specialize in helping children ages 4 and up through individual, parent, and family counseling tailored to meet each person's unique needs. From tackling tough issues at home or school to providing customized workshops and professional development for teachers and community leaders, we're here to make a difference. At Sound Youth Counseling, we believe young people deserve a safe, welcoming, and accepting space to grow and thrive, and every family deserves the tools to support them. If you're looking for support, visit soundyouthcounseling.ca and see how we can help. Sound Youth Counseling, empowering individuals, supporting families, and building stronger communities.
I mean, I think when it comes to, let's say, locker room talk, I think a big part of it is culture. And I think it can be a really positive opportunity for athletes to connect without
Mhm.
coaches and administration present. I do
Mhm.
think there's something to be said about that element because let's be real, regardless of what age you're at, if you know a coach is present, like it adds a layer of
Mhm.
anxiety, of nerves, of accountability, which I think are all very, very important things, right? We want to have coaches in these positions that do create a presence of authority in a leadership way, right? Like,
Mhm.
these athletes want to do well for their coaches and they want to perform well and they want to be a good leader and a good
Mhm.
teammate. And I also think there is an element of that kind of like intimacy with your teammates of having an opportunity to joke around and be silly and
Yeah.
not have to be on. And in a lot of cases, it's the opportunity to be a kid,
Mhm.
depending on,
Mhm.
what age group we're looking at. And there is an element of it can go in a lot of different directions and you can't necessarily control it. And I think this is where some like not great tendencies or this is where bullying can happen, right? Because there are no adults potentially. There is just this, in a lot of ways it is a sacred space for a lot of athletes and a lot of teams, but
Mhm.
ultimately it's up to the individuals in the room to call things out when they hear things that are potentially inappropriate. And again, it could be a great opportunity for team building and camaraderie and, playing your favorite music. I know for, on all the teams I was on, didn't matter what level I was at, we would play music and we would dance and be silly. And it was so awesome. And I'm
Mhm.
also very aware of the other things that go on. And having worked in so many different sport cultures, there's definitely a difference between some of them. I
Mhm.
think, let's be honest, I think hockey is one of them that has a different locker room culture than other sports. Or it seems to have a different culture. Part of that I think is personnel. I think part of that is team culture. I think part of that is the environments they're growing up in. Like, there's a lot of different variables that I don't think we can narrow it down to, like, this is why that happens.
Right.
But I think you're right in saying earlier, it's almost like that bystander effect. Like, if
Yeah.
something is said that's potentially inappropriate, or if something that's done that's inappropriate, is there an athlete on the team that is okay to be on their own and saying, hey, that's not cool? Or can we
Hmm.
not talk about this person like that?
Hmm.
Or perhaps there's some bullying or hazing going on. Hey, I don't think that's a good idea. And and fortunately, there are absolutely athletes out there like that. And I think those are the athletes that are just kind of natural born leaders, but it
Yeah.
takes a lot of courage to be that one person.
I can see different sides, right? The just the connection and the stress relief too, right? Of like being able
Yeah.
to come in and like let off some steam or hype yourself up before a game or just peer to peer level. But then, yes, it is a lot to expect of people. Like, is this the role of the captain on teams with captains? Or is the captain
Yeah.
like how much of that is kind of field rank like event like
Mhm.
supposed to filter or hoped to filter in to the locker
Yeah,
room?
I think there's a couple different ways to view it. I think it really does. I think a lot of things are top down, right? So I think it does start with the coach and the
Mm,
people on the coaching staff. So I think what's really powerful, and especially for certain sport cultures, is when you have a diverse group of coaches and professionals supporting the team. So that's individuals of different backgrounds, men, women. Like, I think it's really, really important for young athletes to see different people in leadership
mm,
positions. I think that is something that, I hope to continue
mm,
to see more of, because then I think, especially athletes at a young age, won't necessarily grow up being like, well, I've never had a female coach, so therefore, like, they're probably not that good because I never had a
mm,
female coach growing up. And I've worked with athletes that it didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter how much authority I established or how much knowledge I had or, how I approach things. They just never wanted to trust me. And I think
mm,
it stems from them never having a woman in their life in a leadership position outside of their home. And again, there's a
mm,
lot of different variables to that, but I have been in situations where it's like I could not win and it didn't matter what I did. And it wasn't until one of the male coaches was like, unfortunately, I just think like this athlete has an issue with you being in a position of power. And that's when I really embodied the mantra of you could be the juiciest, ripest peach, and there's still going
mm.
to be someone that hates peaches. Like, you could be the best of the
Yeah.
best, and
Yeah.
there's still going to be someone that doesn't like you. And that's a hard pill to swallow when you're a people pleaser, but it actually, I think, helped me in amazing ways moving forward in my career, because it was just like, those aren't the people I'm going to use my energy on. I'm still going to take
Right.
care of them and do what I need to do because they're part of the team I'm working with, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to go above and beyond for these individuals if they don't ever feel like ever
Hmm.
changing their minds about me. But
Hmm.
I think that could have been different had they had access to different leaders at different points of their life. So I do think there is something to be said about getting different people involved, even on a youth sport team. Like, are there different people, even if it's like a guest speaker or someone that in the community that used to play their sport that can kind of say like, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do now. Just expose these athletes to different individuals in the sport. And I
Hmm.
also think it is the coach's role to set the precedent of what's accepted and what's not. So I know that there are some, heck, I've played for some coaches that have said some, now looking back on it, I don't think I realized it at the time, but said some questionable things that I was like, okay. And then now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, perhaps that was actually kind of inappropriate, but I didn't know any better at the time. So I
Right.
do think, especially when we're thinking about youth athletes, it's on the coach. Like, I'm sorry, but you're the adult. Like, and
Yeah.
it is on you to set the precedent
Yeah.
and communicate that to not only the captain or the natural kind of leaders on the team, but communicate that to the entire team. That's building culture, right? Like that,
Yes.
if there's a specific rule,
Yep.
everyone should have to abide by that rule. It's not that, some people have to and other people don't. I've been on teams where I had a really, really hard time maintaining respect for my coach because integrity is really important to me. So when
Mhm.
someone says something and does something different, that
Mhm.
really bothers me. Like that does not feel good. And I
Mhm.
played on a team where it was like these are the rules and everyone has to play by these rules, but essentially there were 4 or 5 of my teammates that could do no wrong and they didn't have to
Right.
play by the rules and that didn't feel good, and I think
Right.
that created a disconnect on the team itself. So I just think there
Yeah.
has to be a standard across the board.
Yeah.
And, I do think coaches have to be aware if there are certain personalities on the team that I don't want to
Right.
say are toxic because I think like depending on the age that we're speaking about,
Yeah.
right? Like these kids are still growing and learning and evolving and figuring out who they are.
Yes.
And I do think it's appropriate that as they continue to level up in sport, I do think the standard for behavior does have to be raised, right? Like the bar has to
Mhm.
continue to
Mhm.
raise,
Mhm.
especially when their parents are investing so much time and money and energy. Like it's,
Yes.
yes, be a kid, and I'm all for that. And especially when you're playing different sports, and you also need to be respectful, right?
Yep.
And you need to
Yep.
take care of your teammates and you need to look at, I do think that there are some roles that
Mhm.
you have to kind of grow into as you continue to evolve in sport.
When you look back now on your development as an athlete, kid playing for fun, kind of house league, and then, moving into more competitive, whether just through school teams and then
Mhm.
later, university and like, um, how did you see things? How did you see locker room culture shift within your teams, just through age and competitiveness and
I think there was a sense of maturity, like a natural progression in maturity. Like when I think of my like high school basketball team versus like my university team, I think something I really appreciated, especially being a woman in sport. I think it's natural for women to not love confrontation, and I'm not saying that as a
Mhm.
blanket statement, but I think just naturally we're not like calling each other out and, laying it all out, whereas some men do tend to do that. And that's
Okay.
both from my experience as an athlete myself, but also as a coach and watching how different teams
Hmm.
kind of worked through and problem solved things. But I think something that I did notice is when I was playing basketball at Laurier versus maybe in high school, I did have teammates that would call you out. And there was, I think, a sense of ownership and accountability, and it was always done out of love. Like, these
Hmm.
were some of my favorite teammates because they were like, we messed this up. Like, we need to take, like, you didn't come to practice on time or whatever it was. And it was like, let's lay it
Yes.
all out. And the second that we leave the gym or we leave the locker room, we're teammates, we're friends. It's it's all out of love. And I had a teammate that was so good at holding our
Mm.
team accountable to certain things. And I think at first it almost like was jarring because I'm like, oh my gosh, like this normally like doesn't happen. But then it
Mhm.
was like every time she would share something, she was like, this is coming from a place of love and I want us to be the best we can be. And it was like, okay, yes, that's why let's air it out, let's get it out, and then move
Right.
forward from it. Whereas
Hmm.
I think younger teams, it was like, let's talk behind each other's back and let's get certain teammates on our side. And it became very clicky and very divisive. And I think that happens a lot, right? Like we want to make sure that we have people on our side and they were wrong and we were right. And
Right.
but then no one
Right.
ever talks about it. So I think there was kind of like a natural maturity that just like the older you got and the higher you got in
Yes.
sport, it's like we don't have time for that. Like we don't
Right.
have time to beat around the bush. Like we need to
Yes.
just get it out and move on from it.
Yes. Well, yeah, and I can imagine too, by the time you're at Laurier, like you're playing with people who are pretty serious about basketball. And,
Yes. Yes.
and as opposed to, not that people aren't serious in high school, but sometimes it's just what's going to be my winter sport. I'll pick one,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
try out for that team just because that's what's
Yeah.
available.
Like
Mm.
as we're even just having this
Mhm.
discussion, I'm like, wow, I remember the teams that when we did have such open lines of communication with the coach, like that
Mm.
trickled into when we were alone, right? Like, and I really think it comes down to being communicative and ensuring
Mm.
that yes, this coach can have a sense of authority and have a presence where they're the leader and they're respected, but an athlete also feels comfortable enough to go up to them and say, "Hey, coach, this is what I'm going through right now," or "Hey, coach, this is something that happened and I want to chat with you about
Right.
it." I think
Right.
when there's a level of, approachability. I don't even, is that a word? Approachability? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
there's just checking.
That's
But if there's a
good.
level of approachability for
Hmm.
the athlete to come to the coach and say, "Hey, like this is
Hmm.
what's happening." Like that's the difference between an athlete keeping something to themselves and it perhaps manifesting in different ways within their own mental health down the road,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
a coach being able to be brought into something and saying, "Okay, let me help you through this," or
Hmm.
let's have a discussion with the team, or let's make a change in some
Yes.
capacity. But I think when
Yes.
there are coaches that are like, "I'm the coach and I'm tough and
Yes.
your playing time is going to be impacted if you complain to me," it's like that's, I think, where we get young athletes that suppress feelings and suppress
Hmm.
things that happen because they don't feel comfortable going to that coach.
Hmm.
And I find that being in the strength conditioning role and having spent so much time in the collegiate setting, I felt like I was almost a stepping stone to their coach. Like I was the person that, yes, I was a
Hmm.
leader in their sport and in their life. And yes, I was someone that they trusted and, hopefully respected in the weight room,
Hmm.
but ultimately their abilities in the weight room didn't necessarily dictate their playing time, right? So
Right.
there was
Right.
almost like a little less pressure when they were with me, and I
Yes.
felt that there were a lot of athletes that opened up to me in ways that I didn't anticipate because I was kind of that middle ground. I was a
Yes.
trusted source, but I also, their play time or whatever wasn't on the line when they were speaking to me. And there were some situations where I had no choice, but I had to gather other individuals to help me support this person because of
Hmm.
what they were going through. And depending on the severity, like I knew the steps that were in place at certain schools that I worked at to help
Yeah.
support that person. But I also think there was like another level of trust because
Yeah.
I wasn't the one that
Yes.
dictated their playtime and their success in their sport ultimately.
When did you first realize that you saw things differently from other people? And when you look back, what experiences do you think gave you the confidence or courage or gumption, to then go take that path less traveled?
Those are both great questions. So I'll start with the first part. I think for me, I actually remember a very specific moment. And I was working at another training facility. This was, I think, I was working at Laurier, working at this training facility in the summer months during the hockey off season. And myself and another coach were working with a group of like 13, 14-year-old hockey players. And the coach was coaching a pull up and he was using a lot of internal language. So a lot of, anatomically correct terms. He was
Mm.
talking about joints and muscles. And as he's kind of coaching this exercise up, I'm looking around and just kind of like, I'd like to think I'm pretty intuitive. And maybe this was when I started to notice that I could pick up on things. And I'm looking around and you can just tell these athletes were so lost. And I thought, he's kind of talking to them like they understand their bodies and they're 14 years old. Like they absolutely do not, no offense to any of them, but like they hadn't been taught that. And
Mhm.
so finally I just said, okay, so the coach would say activate your lats when you pull yourself up, and all of the kids are like, what? Like one
What's a
of the kids
lot?
actually like,
Yeah.
yeah, turned to his friend and was like, what? Like I don't even get that. And finally I was just like, I want you to pretend that you're pulling the handles into your shoulders, and I want you to pretend that you're juicing a grapefruit between your armpits as you go up. And all of a sudden it was like light bulbs had gone off. And I think up until that moment I thought I had to sound smart in order to be perceived as smart. And I think being a young woman in strength and conditioning, I had to work a lot harder to gain the respect from colleagues and from athletes that I worked with. Unfortunately, that was what it was at the time. I think things have shifted in some ways, but at the time, like I had to show that I was not there to mess around. Like I knew what I was talking about. I knew the human body. I knew what I needed to know. But in that moment, I'm like, but that's not how athletes need to be coached. If I'm talking to a colleague or a peer, fine, we can talk about the human body in depth. We can focus on internal language and focusing on things within our body, but not when we're speaking to 14-year-old hockey players. And it was in that moment that I'm just like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be embarrassed by sharing these like what I would refer to as external cues or using external
Mhm.
language. And a lot of times that has individuals going to something within their environment or drawing a comparison to something that would make sense to them. So the grapefruit thing, I'm not telling
Right.
them to get grapefruits and put them underneath their armpits and squeeze, but I want them to pretend that they are, and that's what I want them to think about. It's relatable, it's something that
Yes.
everyone can connect with. And up until
Hmm.
that moment, I feel like I was trying so hard to like sound smart that I wasn't being the
Right.
most effective coach. And when finally I was like, I'm going to drop my ego at the door and I'm going to speak to the people in front of me and speak in a
Mhm.
way that they understand, that is honestly when everything changed
Mhm.
for me. I became more confident as a coach. I also think, kind of going into the part two aspect was my experience when I was doing my master's at Ohio University. I was very, very fortunate to work with a group of coaches that instilled a lot of confidence in me and helped me realize that the strengths that I already possessed were important. And because I was so
Mhm.
focused on what I needed to be better at and what I needed to be smarter in and read more about,
Mhm.
and they were just really awesome at being like, no, like we have you in this role because we want you to showcase your strengths. Like, you know how to communicate, you know how to project your voice, you know how to clearly demonstrate things and clearly instruct things. Like, and it wasn't until then that I was like, oh, like I need to use these strengths that I already have. Of course, I'm forever a student. There's always going to be more things I can learn and work on and improve, but I would totally be doing people a disservice if I only focused on that and I didn't use the strengths that I had. And that was, my intuition and being able to read people's like nonverbal communication. I'm not saying I have magic powers. It's just like when you get a
Mhm.
sense, you can kind of pick up on different things when you observe people, and speaking to the individuals in front of me and not who I assumed that they were, or not because I wanted to sound smart and let my ego get in the way, but I really think that was such a pivotal moment for me in my coaching and my confidence, and ultimately is what has led me to where I am today, where now I educate on how to do these things and how to clearly communicate and how to build connection, because it's something that in strength and conditioning specifically, there isn't a lot of information on that. And it's the most important part of our job. What good is all the technical stuff if we can't explain it in a way that the person on the receiving end understands?
It's interesting as you shared that and those realizations, right? It echoes so much of what you've said, right? If we can, someone can know every academically, sport-wise, they can know it all. And if they can't share it in a way where the person cares enough to listen, or in language, right? Even the grapefruits, like that might sound very silly, but
Yeah.
it's digestible, right?
Yeah.
It's the smartness. When you said you want to always like sound smart, right? The smartness is almost the really smart people, I think, are the people who can take these concepts and then share them with any group in a way that they can understand.
I once heard someone refer to that as like true wisdom. Like when you
Mm.
can take something complex, a theory, a thought, and be able to break it down for anyone to understand. Like someone said, like I remember I remember it being a strength and conditioning coach that I really enjoy following, and he essentially said like, you how you coach, pretend you're speaking to your grandmother. How would you explain it to your grandmother? Doesn't matter if this person is, you know, 15 years 15-year training age professional athlete, doesn't matter. It takes way too much brain power for them to have to go through their Rolodex of like, oh yeah, remember what my glutes are. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
my lats are it's just there is research to
Mhm.
support that it takes the brain much longer to digest and utilize information in the internal sense versus the external
Mm.
sense. And
Mm.
I like to say that my job is to have people be confident and competent with their movement when I'm not around. That's my job. So of course I love when people, the individuals I work with, I've worked with them, most of them for years, which I'm very, very grateful for.
Mhm.
But my job is for them to leave the gym and be able to recall cues that I gave them, or to be able to recall the exercises and know that they're doing it correctly and feel confident with it. My
Mhm.
job isn't so they can walk out being like, "Oh, Elena, she's so smart. She like said this fancy thing about the human body." Like no one cares about that. But I care that people can take what they've learned with me in the gym and be able to apply it elsewhere outside of those four walls.
Well, and doesn't that just like perfectly tie back, right, to the community of training to excel, right? Like there's obviously it's yes, for sure, for your knowledge and skill set, but beyond that, a piece of, just wanting to be a part of something that they feel is really special,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
I I've said this to my community before. A lot of them have access to like all the programs that they've followed with me, right? Like they know
Mm,
how to work out, they know how to follow a program. But like I said, I have some that have been with me for years. And it's like, I sometimes have to remind myself that it's like, they're not coming back for the program. Like, they're coming back for the
mhm.
people, for the community, for the culture. And that's something that I do not take lightly. And that's something that is so, so important to me because I want people to feel like they have a space of support and they have a space where they feel like they can grow and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and fail and get back up and have people around them that keeps them moving forward. And, a lot of people are still working from home. A lot of people are still isolated in some capacity in their life, whether
Mhm.
it's living away from family or again, not going into the office. So they're just at home all day. It's like, I want Training to Excel to be a space where people can come and have that like in-person real-time connection and feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves.
Thank you. And it's funny too, because you've mentioned a number of times sort of the nonverbal communication. And for everybody who's missed out, they've missed the like Italian hand gestures that have
Yeah.
continued throughout. So
Yeah.
they're just getting
Yeah.
the audio. They're not getting to see you in
Yeah.
full form. But I appreciate your time with this. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this type of conversation and yeah, thank you so much.
My thanks to Alena Luciani for joining today. That was such a different perspective on things that can influence youth and our roles and coaches. And I think what stood out for me that I loved was the way she talked about coach and what that title means and how carefully someone who uses that word needs to hold that word in their role because it has such a tremendous potential to influence others around them, particularly young athletes, particularly just young people in sport. And how, sometimes too, I think what stood out, what she said is sometimes it's experiencing things we don't want, having the coach that maybe isn't the right match for us, and how sometimes even within there we can find tremendous learning and opportunities for growth. So for anyone listening who's thinking about signing their kids up for sports or encouraging participation in a club team or anything like that, obviously tremendous value in what can be learned, and also a piece of take a minute, watch a practice, watch a game, and make sure you like the fit of the team and the culture that's being created. Thanks for listening to Exception Seekers. Tune in again as we continue to seek overlooked stories that offer new perspectives, disrupt limiting beliefs, and inspire transformative approaches to nurturing youth mental health.
This podcast was produced by North Star Networks, the guiding light for progressive media.